At 6 minutes to 6 on a Thursday evening in Seoul, in a 5-story department store packed with about 1,500 shoppers, something above the ceiling of the top floor let go with a sound like a gunshot, and the roof dropped onto the 5th floor, and the 5th floor dropped onto the 4th, and the whole south wing folded down into its own basement in roughly 20 seconds. 502 people died, but here is what separates this from almost every disaster you have heard of. Nobody was surprised. The cracks had been spreading for 3 months. Engineers had walked that building the very same morning and said out loud that it was going to come down, and the doors stayed open anyway. What was decided in those last 5 hours is still taught in engineering schools around the world, and we will get to it. To understand how a building gets to that morning, you have to understand what Seoul was like in the years before. After the city won the 1988 Olympics, South Korea was building at a speed almost nobody in history had matched, tower after tower going up across the capital, and the country was rightly proud of it. The Sampoong Department Store opened in that boom in 1990 in the Socho district, a bright modern retail palace with 2 wings joined by an atrium, and it worked. Roughly 40,000 people walked through it every single day. If you lived in that part of Seoul, this was simply where you went, and every piece of what was about to happen was already built into the walls. Start with the bones. Sampoong was built as a flat slab structure, which means it had no steel skeleton and no beams. Picture a stack of thick concrete pancakes with columns pushed up between them. That is the whole system. Flat slab is a completely normal, legal way to build. It is fast and it gives you high open ceilings, which is exactly what a department store wants. But it has one specific weakness. With no beams to spread the load sideways, everything concentrates at the small ring of concrete where each column meets the slab. That ring is the entire structure. Overloaded, and the column does not bend or lean or groan. It punches straight up through the floor like a pencil through paper. Engineers call it punching shear, and it is fast and it gives almost no warning. That is the machine. Now watch what got done to it. The building was originally approved as a 4-story residential complex. During construction, the plans were changed to make it a department store instead, and that change meant escalators, and escalators meant openings cut through those precious slabs, which meant a number of support columns had to be taken out. The contractor refused to do it and was fired, and the owner's own construction company finished the job. To open up more floor space for selling, the diameter of the remaining columns was reduced. So before the store ever opened its doors, the structure had fewer columns, and the columns it kept were thinner than designed. Then came the 5th floor, which was never in the original approval at all. It was meant to be a roller skating rink, and then it became something much heavier: 8 restaurants. Korean restaurant floors use ondol, traditional underfloor heating with hot water pipes running through the concrete, so that slab had to be poured thicker and heavier than a normal floor. And there was one more problem with that 5th floor. Its columns did not line up with the columns underneath it. When columns are offset, the load cannot travel straight down the way a building wants it to. It has to travel sideways through the slab first, putting stress precisely where the slab is weakest. And then, on the roof, they put the air conditioning. 3 units, together weighing about 45 tons, sitting on top of a floor already carrying more than it was ever meant to. Investigators later concluded the rooftop load was around 4 times the design limit. You could stop the story here, and this is already a building running on borrowed time. But it survived like that for years, and it might have gone on surviving if not for a noise complaint. In 1993, neighbors complained that the air conditioning was too loud, so the decision was made to move those units to the other side of the roof. The correct way to move 45 tons of machinery is to lift it with a crane. Instead, the units were put on rollers and dragged across the roof, grinding their full weight over the slab as they went. Cracks opened up in the roof where they passed, and the path they took ran directly over a column the investigation would later label 5E. That column was now the sickest point in the building, and every single day it was given more of the same treatment. Whenever the air conditioners ran, they vibrated, and those vibrations traveled down through the concrete and worked the cracks open a little wider. This went on for 2 years. By April of 1995, cracks were visible in the 5th floor ceiling of the south wing. The building was, in the plainest possible language, telling people what was coming. And here's where this story stops being about concrete and starts being about decisions, because that warning was received, and it was understood, and it was answered by moving merchandise from the top floor down to the basement. Not by evacuating, not by calling in engineers to open up the slab and look. The response was to shift some weight and keep trading. Then came the 29th of June. A night security guard had heard strange noises coming from the roof, and he left a note about it. Early that morning, the facility manager went up to look, and by around 10 in the morning, he found what nobody could explain away any longer. Large cracks running around column 5E, wide enough to see into. The restaurant sitting on that column was closed. Later, civil engineering experts were brought in, and it did not take them long. Their assessment was that the building was in danger of collapse. Understand what that means. Hours before it happened, professionals stood inside that store and correctly predicted the disaster. The information was not missing. The information was in the room. 5 hours before the end, the first loud bangs started coming from the upper floors as the slabs tore further apart. The air conditioning was switched off. Sections of the 5th floor were closed, and the store itself stayed open, full of customers, because it was a busy day, and closing meant losing the day's revenue. That is the decision at the center of this. Not a mystery, not a miscalculation, not a hidden flaw nobody could have seen. A choice between a day of sales and a building full of people, made with the correct answer already on the table. Just before 6 in the evening, column 5E finally lost its grip on the slab above it. The concrete punched through, and that column's share of the load instantly transferred to its neighbors, which were already overloaded, and they punched through too, one after another, faster than anyone could move. The roof came down onto the 5th floor, the 5th onto the 4th. Floor by floor, straight into the basement in about 20 seconds. 502 people were killed and more than 900 injured, which made it South Korea's worst peacetime disaster. Rescuers pulled survivors out of that rubble for more than 2 weeks, including one young woman found alive on the 17th day. The investigation was thorough and the courts were unusually direct. The chairman was convicted of criminal negligence and sentenced to 10.5 years, later reduced on appeal. His son, the store's president, received 7 years. 2 district officials were convicted of taking bribes connected to the building's approvals. And South Korea did something that genuinely mattered. It overhauled how buildings are inspected and certified, and the safety audit system that came out of Sampoong is still shaping construction there today. Here's the lesson, and it is not the one people usually take from this. The engineering failure at Sampoong is not really the interesting part. Flat slabs and punching shear are well understood, and the mistakes were textbook. What makes this disaster worth studying is that the warning system worked perfectly. The building cracked. The noises came. The experts arrived and gave the right answer on time in person. Every single safeguard did its job except the last one, which was somebody being willing to lose money on a Thursday. So my question for you, and I'd like to hear it in the comments, in your own workplace, who actually has the authority to shut everything down and eat the loss? Not who should, who really does. Next time, we're going to a place where the failure took less than a minute and killed people in their own homes. In a brand new building where a single explosion in one kitchen peeled an entire corner of a tower block away like it was made of cards. If you want disasters explained properly, with the engineering laid bare, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. See you in the next one.